What is up, guys? Pie Muffin here, and we are back with another video today. I meant to make this video a while ago. Well, not even like a while ago, I mean, because the season's only been over for a little over a week now. But like a day or two after episode 24 aired of Alicization. By the way, this video will obviously contain spoilers since it's a review of everything that happened. So if you haven't watched it or aren't caught up, then obviously click off this video. But I meant to make this video, but this is one of those series that I actually get really emotional about. Just because kind of what these characters kind of mean to me overall, because when I started watching SAO back in, I think it was 2012, when SAO first aired, it was kind of like a weird point in my life, and that's when I really got back into anime, because I was out of anime for a little while. But yeah, anyways, so I wanted to make my video like a day or two after I kind of like digested everything we had just seen in the finale, but then I kind of got sidetracked with stuff. I actually went out and bought I haven't started reading it yet, but I went out and bought the Alicization book for volume 15, which is actually going to cover the first, like, I think like 6 to 7 episodes when the anime comes back in October. By the way, super, like, conflicted, because it's like, it's awesome that they're reasoning for it wanting to... This is a horrible beginning to a review, but just deal with it for the first, like, minute and a half while I get this out. Obviously, it sucks as a fan to have to wait till October, but at the same time, I'm glad their reasoning is because they want it to be top-tier animation, and from what I've heard from people, you know, the animation needs to be on point for the second half. I won't be going into anything that I know about the second half, obviously, because it's not pertaining to the part 1 of Alicization, but just kind of wanted to throw that out there. So anyways, I needed, like I said, I needed like a day to kind of digest everything, because that finale was, that was hard to watch. That was a tough finale. But let's just start from the top. So obviously, you know, the first episode, if you were watching right when it started of Alicization, it was kind of like, it was a two-parter. It was a 1 hour, like, special, which kind of got us introduced to this whole aspect of the underworld and everything, as well as getting us introduced to the fact that, hey, you know, Laughing Coffin assholes are still out there. So, there was that whole thing, and the whole thing is very interesting with Kirito's predicament in the beginning, because obviously the first time he goes into the underworld, it's one of those things where he understands, like, hey, when I'm in here, I don't remember anything from my outside life, and vice versa. When I go back out there, I won't remember anything that happened in here. Obviously, this is all some sort of program to basically create these AIs. Well, the AIs are already created in the world, but none of them are actually real people. Which is something I was curious about as we were watching, you know, like characters like Yu-Gi-Oh! Alice, the Pontifex, everyone that we saw in there. I was like, is there any chance that any of these people have real bodies on the outside, or is this like one of those things? But I mean, as of right now, it seems like they don't, because I feel like if they did, with like I said, once again, spoilers if you haven't clicked off yet, with Yu-Gi-Oh's death, you would have thought if he was someone who was actually in the real world, they would have panned over to show a body or something. So I think it's, like I said, I don't know for sure. I don't know everything about the second half that we're going to get in October. But I think it's safe to say that they probably don't have real bodies. Which is very interesting to me, because obviously I've seen cover arts for future volumes, and it does make me question certain things. But yeah, so moving forward, so it was very interesting. So the second time Kirito goes back into the underworld is obviously after his incident with that Laughing Coffin member, and he gets injected with that stuff, and basically putting him back in the underworld is somehow fixing his, you know, his brain and his what's it called, the Fluct his Fluct and everything. So being in that, it seems like it was kind of like a double objective from Kikoka. You know, obviously he was helping Kirito, but at the same time he was using Kirito to kind of further his goals for everything. And obviously it seems like there's obviously some kind of military, like, plan for this whole underworld thing, but we don't really know too much about it. Even at the point we're at now, we don't know, like, everything. Now, one of the things I really liked about I'm not gonna just do because the way I started this, I kind of just made it a kind of like a synopsis about what I like and don't like, but I'm gonna jump around a bit. There's one thing I liked and I'm kind of weird about feeling wise. So obviously the main part of this season is Kirito, Eugeo, and Alice, and kind of Kirito and Yuji's journey to save Alice. So obviously characters like Asuna, Klein, all of them, they're irrelevant. Even though Asuna is at Wrath, you know, because she's worried about Kirito, she literally, her role in the first half of this is very minute, you know. I think there's maybe 4 episodes where she's even, like, in it. And even then, she's just kind of like, it's watching over Kirito. And I agree with some people's issues with this. Not just with Asuna, but just the series as a whole, ever since SAO started. It's kind of one of those things where a new character will get introduced, they'll have their cool moment, and then they just are in the background to make Kirito look cool. And I do see that. Kirito does get extreme favoritism and probably the most broken plot armor of any anime character I've seen. But at the same time, it doesn't bother me too, because one of the things is, like, Klein is my favorite character in the series. I've always been about, you know, kind of like the secondary best friend character. You know, in Dragon Ball, it's Krillin for me. In Bleach, it's Chad. I'd say One Piece, it's probably Usopp. You know, etc., etc. Like, the second character, the best friend character, is always my favorite, so that is why I really like Klein, and his personality is just something I'm really into. But that's what's interesting here is that, you know, obviously there are small parts, you know, they're trying to figure out where Kirito went off to and stuff like that. We get that kind of early on. And then we get some of the stuff, you know, what was interesting about just looking at fans this season when they talked about SAO as it was going on, most fans were into it when it was just about Kirito, Eugeo, and Alice, like when he was actually in that world. And I think that's because it kind of felt like a completely different anime. It felt like Kirito was like a brand new character in this world, and he was just living his life in this world. And then every time it went back to the outside world and we got like a scene with Asuna eating lunch with a scientist, it's like, why do we care about this? We don't want this. Which will be very interesting when this whole arc is kind of over, because what will fans feel like once, you know, the underworld is over and done with? Obviously, Eugeo is dead, you know, so Eugeo's not going to be a character anymore. You know, we'll see what happens with Alice when this arc ends, but either way, I mean, obviously, if you're someone who's even seen pictures of the light novels, you know, Alice is going to be in a future light novel, which is the arc after Alicization, so obviously they do something with her. I don't know how it all works out, but obviously something's gonna happen there. So back to kind of how the story, I like and dislike something about the pacing, because for 24 episodes, I thought the pacing overall was fine. The only thing I kind of wish this was longer, and obviously they're doing it just as kind of like a 50-episode anime total. The only reason it stopped on episode 24 instead of a rounded 25 like most animes do is because part 1 was a 2-parter. Like, it was a 42-minute episode, so you count that as kind of 2 episodes. So in reality, it was 25 episodes. Just the time jump from when Kirito... And I don't know if it's like I haven't read the light novel for this specific part, but I'm curious to know if the light novel took more time to explain, not even explain, just to give us time as Kirito and Eugeo are growing up. Because obviously we get this whole thing where they're traveling from Rulid all the way to the capital, and then it just kind of skips ahead to when they're already kind of like, I don't remember what role they exactly had, but they had their own subordinates, essentially. So it just kind of skipped ahead to that. And then from there on is when, you know, there's no more time skips after that. It just kind of moves forward from that. So, that was my only thing. I think it would have been cool to see them kind of grow, because obviously in Kirito's mind, he's lit from when Alicization, not when it starts, but from after he gets stabbed by the Laughing Coffin member, and he goes into, you know, that coma or whatever, and they put him inside the machine. So from that point when he enters the game, at the age of, I guess he was 8, because he's supposedly like 17 or 18 now, I think, like in the real world. So he spent like 10 years in there. So the time he spent in there, he spent about 10 years. But on the outside, sorry, I was just kind of thinking, trying to do the math right there. So it was 10 years for him in his brain, you know, because obviously they set this whole thing. I don't know what you exactly word it, but basically it's kind of like a hyperbolic time chamber situation in Dragon Ball, where it's only a certain amount of time inside, but on the outside it's like a normal time. So I think the way it translated, if I remember reading it correctly, it was only like 3 or 4 days in like real life that he was in there. So like 3 or 4 days, Asuna was aboard Wrath and all that stuff. But for Kirito, it was 10 years. Now, I may be wrong on the math and everything. I'd have to really check into that. This is just kind of like what I'm remembering reading through watching the anime and what people say. So I think it was like 3 or 4 days in the real world, but 10 years for him. So the interesting thing for me is how he's kind of gonna... And from what I understand, once Alicization ends, it jumps straight into the next arc, so we're not going to get any, like, breathing room. And then I think the arc, from what I've read, after Alicization is the final arc of SAO, so that's when the whole story will wrap itself up. So that'll be interesting to see how he kind of copes with this, because, you know, if you really think Kirito from the very beginning, he's had to deal with so much shit up until this point, you know. He had to deal with letting people die in SAO. You know, he had to deal with all the stress he had to deal with in Alfheim with friggin' Fairy King Oberon doing what he did to Asuna. He had to deal with the Gun Gale stuff. You know, obviously he still had some regret about having to kill players despite the fact that they were Laughing Coffin members back in SAO. And then, you know, all the shit he had to do to save Sinon in the end. And then you get into Elise's... Kirito's constantly put in these situations where obviously his mind and stuff are, you know, just pushed. And honestly, he's a kid. I think he's like a fresh out of high school kid, essentially. You know, he's still a kid. He's still under the age of 20. So having someone deal with all this stuff and everything he had to deal with Alicization, you know, he spent 10 years with Yu-Gi-Oh! And he essentially lost his best friend or someone. You could even say it was like his brother. So... It makes you wonder, like, how much is this really gonna... And you could see it in the final scenes when he was yelling at Kikoka and everything after Yu-Gi-Oh! Died. You could see, like, you know, the bags under his eyes. Like, he was emotionally strained to the point, to, like, a breaking point. And anyone who's seen the cover art for the next volume, what the anime will cover when it comes back, knows that this is going to be something that's going to carry over into the next half of the arc. So that's going to be something very interesting to see how everything up to this point is really just going to, you know, take its toll on Kirito, because honestly, overall, he hasn't had much of a break from this life of, you know, life and death situations where he's constantly having to stick his neck out for people and, you know, pretty much do what he believes is right. Now, I'm going to touch on this topic really quick, because I'm sure it'll be something that people have talked about before. I really don't care for... Like, I understand the author's mindset when putting these scenes in, but I don't think they're necessary. I think there are other ways to show that a character is a bad character. Now, obviously, in SAO, there wasn't any scenes like this. But once we got to Alfheim is the first time we saw it with, you know, the final battle against the Fairy King, where he basically was, you know, stripping Asuna of her clothes in front of Kirito and all that stuff. We saw it again in Gun Gale at the end when, I forget Sinon's quote-unquote friend, I'm using air quotes right now, but he essentially tried to do stuff to her before Kirito showed up. There wasn't anything in the second half of Season 2, because it was just the, we obviously had the Yuki stuff, and then we had the Excalibur stuff. So nothing really went on there. That was kind of a relaxing little set of arcs. And we had 2 scenes in it in this season. I feel like the second one was more unneeded than the first one. So obviously, I'm talking about with Roni and Tiese. I don't really know how to say her name exactly, but with the two royals, I forget what their names were. I didn't really like them at all. Who essentially forced Yu-Gi-Oh to, because of the whole, the index, that, you have to obey. It says that, people of a higher living status, you can't go against them. And obviously it was the borderline, rape scene where they were basically just flaunting their powers. And obviously it ended up not happening, which it always, in SAO, it always happens. It always gets stopped short. Which doesn't make it any better that these scenes are in this game, but they could have done this scene so many different ways instead of having it be a borderline rape scene. You could have had them try to kill them instead. You don't always have to kind of go to that, and I'm hoping there's nothing like that in the second half of Alicization. I don't know if there is, but I'm really hoping it's kind of not, and I hope the final arc doesn't have anything like this, because I'm kind of tired of seeing it, to be honest. And as for the second scene, I understand the whole setup was to basically stop Quinella from leaving the world, and they had already set up the fact that, what's his name, the fat troll guy, I can't remember his name at the moment, but essentially him, wanting to sleep with her, I'm still trying to think of his name, while I'm talking, but I can't think of it. And they kind of set that up, and, I got it in the moment, but then when they actually got to the scene where he was basically, on top of her as she was trying to get away and escape to the real world, they could have made it less graphic, I guess. I assume they wanted to make it, as the light novel had it, but at the same time I was just like, okay, we get it. He's gonna burn her alive and they're both gonna die. They could have literally just shown him flying up and then there'd be a big explosion, and that would have been, fine. Because I think that's the big thing that kind of, and I'm seeing it with the people who are currently watching the dub, because the dub just got to the first borderline rape scene, and it really does turn people off from the show when they see stuff like that. And obviously SAO is about more than scenes like that, because, like I said, the first 12 episodes of SAO didn't have it. You didn't have it till, episode 24 or 25 of Season 1. And then in Gun Gale, you had another one on, episode 12 or 13. I forget what it was. And then you get 2 scenes in Alicization, which was only 25 episodes. You got 2 of those kinds of scenes. Obviously, the first scene is a lot worse than the second one. The second one was only, 30 seconds. But it's still something that, I don't think is very necessary. I understand you want to make this dark, you want to make these characters seem like scum that you don't want anyone to like, but there are other ways to kind of go around it. But anyways, back to, I love the progression of Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh's bond. Obviously Yu-Gi-Oh in the beginning was very timid. As this journey went on, he was blaming himself the whole time for not trying to save Alice from the Integrity Knight that obviously brought Alice away and took away her humanity. So the progression for that and how it kind of came full circle with, him basically accepting that, all of this might have been prevented if he had just done something different. He accepts that he was weak, and that's why he fell for kind of Quinella's powers. I was really sad at that final scene, obviously when they showed Kirito and Alice as kids, making that birthday present for Yu-Gi-Oh! And then, I'm getting choked up. Stop. I'm getting choked up just talking about it right now. But anyways, I did really love that scene. It was a very nice send-off for his character. I was honestly not expecting that they would just kill, because they spent so much time, basically having this kind of brotherly relationship with Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh! And it was just really emotional to, see him actually go away. His body's torn in half. He's telling Kirito, your sword is like the night sky. It should be called the Night Sky Blade, which was obviously really sweet. I think that Yu-Gi-Oh's death is probably going to be something that weighs heavily on Kirito in the second half. Like I said, I have heard some things. I know there is some focus on and some motivation when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh's death. I'm really hoping that this isn't one of those things where Kirito's friends, are like, hey, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting this way? It was just a game. Because that would really bother me. especially being put in Kirito's situation. If you had your friend, like, you just spent the last 10 years with this guy, and he was basically a brother to you, and then now he's gone. Regardless of if he was a real person or not, because obviously, you know, to the people on the outside, this world is just filled with a bunch of AIs, in a way. But obviously to Kirito, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was more than that. Yu-Gi-Oh! Alice, they're both more than that. I know some people were confused about one scene, because they obviously talk about, you know, if Yu-Gi-Oh! Was still okay, then him and Kirito would have to fight over their Alices. Obviously, there was Integrity Knight Alice, and then there's Young Alice, who never got to live her life. And that's what that scene of Yu-Gi-Oh! Basically walking through that door with Alice was. It's basically them both dying. So yeah, so Integrity Knight Alice will permanently be in Alice's body. So even after this arc, you know, whatever happens with Alice, that's always going to be Integrity Knight Alice. And I assume she's never going to get Alice's memories. She's just going to have to be one of those situations where she's going to be like, okay, well, I'll just live the life that Alice wasn't able to. I did like I said, I'm jumping around. I did like the pre-stuff too before they got sent, before they basically got taken away to the tower where Alice was by the Integrity Knights, because we did get this this nice little thing between Kirito and his mentor. So that was pretty nice, you know, seeing little teacher-student bonding, stuff like that. There was obviously also the stuff for the flowers that Kirito wanted to give to her. What else was... what was her... Basically, the librarian. She was really cool. I really liked the whole, like, you know, she'd been stuck in this library for, like, you know, hundreds of years, and essentially all she wanted to, you know, do was to be thanked for something she was doing, because she was all alone. She didn't have anyone to thank her for that. So that little embrace that with Kirito and her was really nice. You know, just that one hug was enough to make her feel like everything was worth it. So it really goes to show you that, you know, regardless of anime or not, you know, you don't know what someone's going through. So one simple gesture can go a long way to basically helping someone in some way. But overall, I'd say this season was... I was really into this season. I don't think there was a single week where I skipped it, because sometimes with anime, I'll let episodes pile up and stuff. Like with Black Clover, I usually let 2 or 3 episodes go by, and then I just binge them all together. With this, I couldn't wait each week for the next... I think there was only 1 week, and that was when they did that recap episode. It was basically an episode where Kirito was explaining to Integrity Knight Alice who she really was. But they basically used that as a way to make a recap episode. So, I think that was the only episode I didn't watch, like, the day it came out. Every other episode I did. And obviously, when October comes around, I'll definitely be watching. I'm sure the first part of episode 1 will probably kind of just be recapping the very end of the last episode. I'm curious if they'll do the same thing, if they're going to do a 1-hour, like, season premiere, like they did with the beginning of this arc. That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, I'm going to be reading the light novels that come... I know... So I have volume 15, which I said will cover, like, the first, you know, 6-7 episodes of when the show comes back. And then I know volume 16 will have a hardcover copy. Sometime... I think it's, like, May 21st, so a little over a month from now. And I'll read that, but I don't know if the other... Because I think it's, like, 4 or 5 books that's going to be in the... Because this the first 24 episodes were adapted from 6 books. But I think Alicization ends at, like... So I think it's 15, 16, 17, and 18. And then I think 19 and 20 are, like, a side story. I don't know if they'll adapt that into an anime or if that'll just be, like, a side anime. And I think 21... is the where the final arc starts. So I think the second half of this Alicization arc will be adapted from 4 books, which is interesting because you would think that would make it shorter, but it probably won't. So I'm very interested to see what they kind of do with that. obviously, now that Queenella's gone, all the Integrity Knights from before, I don't think any of them really... I think just one of them died, if I remember correctly. It was the one that they fought on the way up the stairs. But all the other Integrity Knights should still be alive. So it'll be interesting to see if we see them. Obviously, there's Roni and TSA. And then we obviously have Alice's sister. So a lot of characters that are still around in the underworld. So I'll be very interested. Obviously, I know that the second half of this is going to be called War of the Underworld. So... Oh, and of course, I'm forgetting the most important part. So yeah, obviously there's the War of the Underworld. And then, obviously, Wrath has been attacked. And I knew I recognized... I actually had to do some research on it, but I knew I recognized, basically and I always find it funny that they make the Americans the bad guys. But, obviously, one of those guys was the one that Sinon warned Kirito about. That he was like one of those military guys, you know, the military guys who basically go into Gungale to do their training. And then there was that other evil guy with the scar. So, obviously, there's going to be a callback to those guys. I also know that some of Kirito's friends from the real world will be entering this underworld, but I'm not sure to what capacity yet. Obviously, you know, my top pick, like I said before, Klein's my favorite character, so I hope he gets some kind of role in all this. And then it'd be really cool to see, like, Sinon, Leafa, Lisbeth, Silica, you know, just Aegil, just, like, everyone kind of hop in and we get this, like, giant war, but I guess we'll have to see what happens. That's kind of my ramble and my thoughts on the first part. Let me know what you guys thought down below, definitely. I know this is a little different. I normally do other content on here, but I do like to do reviews on stuff every now and then when it's something I really liked. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Throw a like if you did. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more if you're new to the channel. I'll see you all next time. Have a wonderful day, everyone.